New York City, late afternoon in March 1980. The sky was gray and overcast. Cold wind blew through the Manhattan streets. Muhammad Ali stood outside the Plaza Hotel on Fifth Avenue, waiting for transportation. He was 38 years old, officially retired from boxing for over a year now. The greatest fighter who ever lived, no longer fighting, just existing, just being Muhammad Ali in the aftermath of glory. Parkinson's disease was beginning to show its cruel symptoms. His hands trembled slightly when he held them still. His speech was noticeably slower than the lightning-fast trash talk of his prime. The shuffle that made him famous in the ring was now an involuntary shuffle caused by neurological decline. He moved differently, talked differently, but he was still unmistakably Muhammad Ali, still had that presence, still commanded attention just by existing. A yellow taxicab pulled up to the curb. Ali opened the door and slid into the back seat. The cab smelled like old coffee and cigarette smoke, typical New York taxi. He settled in and closed the door. "Where to?" the driver asked without turning around. "Just another fare, just another ride." "Madison Square Garden, please," Ali said, voice quieter than it used to be, not the booming, confident voice that had declared, "I am the greatest," 1,000 times. Softer now, slower, each word taking more effort, but still unmistakably his voice. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror casually, then froze completely, stared, gripped the steering wheel. "You're Muhammad Ali," he said. Not a question, a statement of disbelief. "That's right," Ali said with a small smile. Used to this reaction, used to being recognized everywhere. The driver turned completely around in his seat. Black man in his early 50s, thin, weathered face, eyes wide with shock and emotion. "The Muhammad Ali, the greatest boxer who ever lived?" "Some people call me that," Ali said humbly. The arrogance of his youth had mellowed into something gentler, something sadder. The driver shook his head slowly, in complete disbelief. Tears were already forming in his eyes. "You saved my life. I need to tell you this. You saved my life and you don't even know it. You have no idea what you did for me." Ali looked confused, studied the driver's face. "I don't think we've ever met before, have we?" "No, sir, we haven't," the driver said emphatically. "But you saved my life anyway. You saved it without knowing, without trying, just by being who you are, by doing what you did. Let me tell you while I drive, please. I've been carrying this story inside me for 13 years, waiting for this exact moment, waiting to tell you. Please let me tell you." "Of course," Ali said gently. "Tell me." They pulled into heavy Manhattan traffic, yellow cabs everywhere, honking, people shouting. The driver began talking, voice emotional and shaking, words coming fast like water from a broken dam. Like he'd been holding this story inside for 13 years and finally had his one chance to share it with the person who mattered most. 1967, the driver said, hands gripping the wheel tight. "April 1967, I was in Vietnam, 23 years old, drafted straight out of college. Didn't want to go, didn't believe in the war, thought it was wrong, thought we had no business being there. But I went anyway, because that's what you did back then. You went when your country called. Even if you thought the war was completely wrong, even if you knew you might die for absolutely nothing, you went." Ali listened silently in the back seat. This wasn't the first time someone had told him a story like this. Not the first Vietnam veteran, not the first person who said Ali had changed their life. But each story mattered deeply. Each one was personal. Each one was a human life altered. "I watched you refuse the draft on television," the driver continued, voice breaking with emotion. "April 28, 1967, Houston. Armed Forces examining an entrance station. I watched you step forward when they called Cassius Clay, and you refused to step forward again when they called you for induction. watched you give up absolutely everything in that moment. Your heavyweight title, your boxing license in every state, your income, your reputation, everything. All for principle. All for believing the war was morally wrong. All for standing up to the entire United States government. The driver wiped tears from his eyes while driving, and I thought to myself sitting in that jungle, if Muhammad Ali can stand up to the whole government, if he can sacrifice literally everything he worked his whole life for, then maybe I don't have to keep fighting in this war that I don't believe in. Maybe I don't have to keep killing people for a cause I think is wrong. What did you do? Ali asked quietly, already knowing this story wouldn't have a happy ending. I refuse to fight anymore, the driver said, voice firm despite the tears. 2 months after you refused induction, June 1967, told my commanding officer directly I wouldn't kill anymore, that I believed the war was completely wrong, that Muhammad Ali was right, that I couldn't participate anymore, that my conscience wouldn't allow it. What happened? Ali asked, though he knew. He heard variations of this story dozens of times. The price of conscience during Vietnam. They court-martialed me immediately, the driver said bitterly, dishonorably discharged me, sent me home in total disgrace in August 1967. My family was deeply ashamed. My father wouldn't speak to me for 3 years. People in my neighborhood called me a coward every single day, called me a traitor to my country, said I was hiding behind your courage, using you as an excuse to avoid my duty. I'm sorry that happened to you, Ali said quietly, genuinely pained. He'd heard similar stories, but each one hurt. Each person who'd suffered for following his example carried weight on Ali's conscience. Don't be sorry, the driver said quickly, urgently. Don't you dare be sorry for what you did. You saved my life. 3 months after I came home in disgrace, November 1967, my entire unit was killed. Every single one of them. All 43 men. Ambushed in the jungle near the Cambodian border at dawn. Wiped out completely in less than 10 minutes of brutal fighting. Not one survivor out of 43 soldiers. If I'd still been there, if I hadn't refused to fight, if I hadn't come home when I did, I'd be dead right now. I'd be a name carved on the Vietnam Memorial Wall. One more statistic. One more number. But I came home alive. I'm alive. I'm here. I'm breathing. I'm living. Because of you. Because you showed me it was okay to stand on principle, even when absolutely everyone in the entire country thinks you're wrong. The taxi was completely quiet for a long, heavy moment. Just traffic sounds outside filtering in, honking horns, sirens in the distance, the perpetual sound of New York moving past them indifferently. Ali was processing this revelation, the weight of it. 43 men dead. 1 man saved because of Ali's stand. The driver was crying quietly while he drove, tears streaming down his weathered face, hands trembling on the steering wheel. I lost everything when I came home, the driver continued after collecting himself, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. Lost my family's respect completely and permanently. My father died in 1970 without ever speaking to me again after I came home. 3 years of total silence. Lost job opportunities everywhere I applied. Couldn't get work anywhere at all because of the dishonorable discharge stamped on my military record. Every application automatically rejected. Every interview ended the moment they saw my discharge papers. Ended up driving this cab out of pure economic desperation in 1968. Started driving just to survive. Still driving it 12 years later in 1980. Most people who know me see me as a complete failure, as a coward who hid behind Muhammad Ali's courage to avoid his patriotic duty to his country. You're not a coward, Ali said firmly, voice suddenly stronger than it had been all day. You stood up for what you believed in your heart. That takes real courage, more courage than just following orders without question. You chose conscience over convenience. That's the definition of courage. I know that now, the driver said, voice still emotional but steadier and more confident. Took me years and years to truly know it, to believe it deep down, to accept it as truth. But I know it now deep in my soul, and I'm alive. I'm here in this cab. I'm not dead in a Vietnamese jungle with my unit. I get to see my daughter Sarah grow up. She's 10 years old now. I get to watch her play in the park, watch her learn in school, watch her slowly become a person with dreams. I get to live a life. I get to have experiences and memories. I get to breathe air and see sunrises and feel rain on my face because of you. Because you showed me that standing on principle matters infinitely more than what other people think about you. They were pulling up to Madison Square Garden now, the iconic arena looming ahead. The meter showed $8.50 exactly. The driver turned it off deliberately, with purpose. Turned around completely in his seat to face Ali directly. Face still wet with tears, eyes red from crying, but determined and resolved. I can't charge you for this ride, the driver said with absolute certainty. You gave me my entire life. I can't charge you $8.50 for a 20-minute cab ride. That would be insulting to what you did. You gave me everything that matters. This ride is free. It has to be free. Please, let me do this one small thing to say thank you for my life. I should pay, Ali said, reaching for his wallet. This is your job, your income, your livelihood. Take the money. You earned it. No, sir, the driver said, voice firm, unwavering. I absolutely will not take it. I can't take it. You paid for this ride 13 years ago, in April 1967, when you stood up to the United States government, when you sacrificed everything you'd worked for, when you showed me and thousands of other young men that it was okay to believe in something more important than following orders. This ride is already paid for. Has been paid for since 1967. I won't take your money. I can't. Ali looked at him seriously, saw the tears still flowing, saw the raw emotion, saw how desperately much this meant to this man, saw that refusing to let him do this would be disrespectful. Took his hand off his wallet, extended his hand across the seat instead. The driver took it immediately. They shook hands firmly. Two men who'd both paid terrible prices for principle. Both suffered enormously for doing what they thought was right. Both survived when they could have been destroyed. Both still here. Both still standing. What's your name? Ali asked, still holding his hand. James, the driver said. James Washington. James, Ali said, looking him directly in the eyes. You didn't hide behind me. You need to understand that. You stood beside me. You made your own choice independently, took your own risk knowing the consequences, paid your own price. That's not hiding. That's not cowardice. That's courage. Pure courage. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. You're a hero. Thank you, Jane said, crying openly now, not trying to hide it anymore. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for saying that. You have no idea what it means to hear you say that. Ali got out of the cab slowly, his movements careful because of the Parkinson's, turned back deliberately, leaned into the driver's window, looked at James Washington directly. James, you know what the greatest thing is about all of this? What's that? James asked, wiping his eyes. We both survived everything they threw at us, Ali said with conviction. They tried to break us completely, tried to destroy us, tried to make us regret standing on principle. The government, society, our own families, everyone, and we both survived. We're both still here breathing, both still standing. That's the greatest thing. That's the victory. We won the real fight. James nodded emotionally, couldn't speak, too overwhelmed, just nodded and watched Ali walk away slowly toward Madison Square Garden. The greatest fighter who ever lived, still the greatest. Not for boxing anymore, for what he stood for what he'd sacrificed, for what he'd shown people like James that standing on principle was possible, even when it cost you everything. The story spread rapidly through New York. Someone at the Garden had seen the exchange, seen Ali and the cab driver, seen the intense emotion. Asked James what happened. James told the complete story without holding anything back. It got picked up immediately. Newspapers ran it. Radio stations talked about it. TV news covered it. The cab driver who wouldn't charge Muhammad Ali. The Vietnam veteran who came home because of Ali's example. The 43 soldiers who died. The man who survived by following his conscience. Reporters found James Washington within days, asked him to tell the complete story for their audiences. He did, told them about Vietnam, about watching Ali refuse induction, about refusing to fight himself, about his unit being completely wiped out 3 months later, about driving a cab for 12 years in disgrace, about finally getting to thank the man who saved his life, about refusing to charge him because how do you possibly charge someone for your entire life? The story went viral before viral was even a word people used. Everyone wanted to talk to James. Everyone wanted to hear about the encounter directly from him, about Ali's humility, about James's gratitude, about two men who both paid unbearable prices for principle, finding each other randomly in a taxicab 13 years later, about the refusal to charge $8.50 for a life. James Washington's life changed dramatically, almost overnight. People stopped seeing him as a coward and a failure, started seeing him as someone who'd stood on principle exactly like Ali did. Job offers came from unexpected places. Better opportunities than driving a cab. Respect from strangers. Handshakes. Thank yous. 13 years after coming home in complete disgrace, James Washington was finally honored publicly for his courage. Finally recognized as someone who'd done the right thing. He never charged Ali for that ride. Not then, not ever. And whenever he told the story afterward, which was often for the rest of his life, he always ended exactly the same way. Muhammad Ali gave me my entire life. How could I possibly charge him $8.50 for a cab ride? The ride was free, will always be free, forever. Some debts can't be paid with money. Some debts can only be paid with gratitude and memory. Ali heard about the story spreading everywhere, called James Washington personally. They talked on the phone for over an hour, became genuine friends. James visited Ali sometimes in the following years. They talk about Vietnam, about standing on principle, about surviving when everyone wants you to fail, about what really matters in life. Two men who'd both refused to do what everyone said they absolutely should do. Both paid terrible prices. Both survived anyway. Both won the fight that mattered. When Ali's Parkinson's got progressively worse through the 1980s and 1990s, James visited more frequently, helped however he could, drove him places, kept him company, reminded him constantly that what he'd done in 1967 mattered enormously, that real lives had been saved, that James Washington was alive and breathing and raising a daughter because Ali had the courage to stand up to power. The lesson is simple and profound and timeless. You never know who you're influencing with your actions. You never know whose life you're changing without even knowing it. Ali stood on principle in April 1967 and saved a soldier's life thousands of miles away in Vietnam. Didn't know it at the time, didn't plan it, didn't do it for that reason. Just did what he thought was morally right, regardless of the personal cost. And 13 years later, in a random taxicab, found out his courage had literally saved a human life. James Washington lived another 30 productive years, died peacefully in 2010 at age 66. At his funeral in Brooklyn, his daughter Sarah told the complete story to everyone gathered, about her father refusing to fight in Vietnam after watching Ali refuse induction, about coming home in total disgrace, about the dishonorable discharge, about Muhammad Ali showing him that standing on principle mattered more than anything. About the taxi ride in March 1980. About refusing to charge the man who gave him his entire life. About the friendship that lasted until Ali died in 2016. Sarah Washington still keeps her father's taxi driver license framed on her wall. Next to it is a photograph from 1980 showing Ali and her father shaking hands through the taxi window. A moment frozen in time. Two men who stood for principle when it cost them everything. Two men who survived. Two men who won. The cab itself, the actual yellow taxi from that day, was eventually donated to the Smithsonian Museum. It sits in the American History section. A plaque explains the story. This taxicab was driven by James Washington, Vietnam veteran, on March 17, 1980, when he gave Muhammad Ali a free ride to Madison Square Garden. Washington refused payment because Ali's 1967 refusal of the Vietnam draft had inspired Washington to also refuse to fight, likely saving his life when his unit was killed 3 months later. The $8.50 fare was never charged. Every year on March 17th, veterans gather at that taxicab in the museum. They tell their own stories about how Ali's stand against the war affected them, how it gave them courage, how it saved lives, how it showed that principle matters more than obedience, how one man's courage can ripple out and save people he'll never meet. If this story moved you deeply, share it with someone who needs to know that standing on principle matters even when you can't immediately see the impact you're making. Subscribe for more untold stories about Muhammad Ali and the lives he touched without even knowing. And remember, in March 1980, a taxi driver named James Washington refused to charge Ali $8.50 for a ride. Said Ali had already paid for it in 1967 by standing up to the government, by showing that principle matters more than power, by giving James the courage to refuse to fight in a war he didn't believe in, by saving his life without knowing it. That's the real lasting impact of moral courage. You never know who you're saving. You never know whose life you're changing forever. You never know what ripples your stand for principle will create. You just do what's right and trust that it matters. Ali stood for principle and saved James Washington's life. 13 years later, they met in a taxi, and James refused to charge him because how do you charge someone $8.50 for your entire life? You don't. Some debts can't be paid with money. They can only be honored with memory and gratitude, and telling the story so others understand that courage matters, that principle matters, that standing up matters even when you stand alone.